Well, happy Friday and welcome to our weekly weather brief. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracey, joined alongside, of course, by the super talented...
Who paid you? I'm meteorologist Kerrin, Jeromin. Nice to see you, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this weekly weather catch-up where we're getting you updated on the weekly stories in weather, climate, and science in 10 minutes or less. So the clock's ticking now. We're underway.
We got a lot to cover this week. So let's jump into it because we're also talking about stuff that happened last week, because when we did our recording last week, there was this major announcement and we weren't quite prepared to cover it at that point. We needed more information. We needed somebody to talk to, kind of outside of our area of expertise. But there was this huge news that dropped late last Thursday about the change in the EPA findings, which there's still a lot of kind of confusing wording around this. But can you do a better job of explaining this, Kerrin?
Yeah, now that I've had a week to kind of absorb what happened. Yeah. So last Thursday, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, they repealed or basically changed their mind on this landmark finding from 2009 that said greenhouse gases are a danger to our health and our environment and all these things, right? It's called the endangerment finding. And last week, the EPA said, we're going to repeal that, right? The federal government no longer has to abide by this finding and use this scientific foundation to regulate emissions. And so that's really a huge deal, right? When we talk about climate, it really is the foundation of any sort of emission standards, things that scientists worldwide have agreed upon is truth, that greenhouse gases harm our planet and can cause negative effects. And so this change, there's a lot to unpack and a lot of impact that could come of it. Going forward.
We didn't know kind of what the impact was going to be, both immediately and in the long term. So we talked to somebody else, right?
Yeah, Monica Medina. She's the former Assistant Secretary of State for Oceans, Environment, and Science, and the former Deputy Administrator of NOAA during the Biden and Obama administration. So she weighed in on several things related to this repeal, and here's what she had to say.
These air standards are now up for being removed completely, and they don't have to actually be enforced. So companies can stop keeping up their controls on air emissions, and no one's going to come after them for violating the Clean Air Act anymore. So it's things like NOx and CO2, which are invisible in some respects, but when they're put out in the air together, they often create smog, or there's particulate matter that comes from power plants that makes it really hard for people to breathe.
Okay, Kerrin, this is really interesting, but there's still a lot of confusion as to what the impact might be here in the near term. Does she speak to that at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we know down the line when we think about climate and emissions, how that could impact our global climate in the long run and, weather. But here and now, she had a really great point about during the COVID pandemic about when we stopped driving and we stopped putting all these emissions in the air, what happened? Listen to this.
During the COVID pandemic, when people stopped driving, under the standards that we had in place, the really protective ones that we had in place, people noticed the air was cleaner. And we saw it with our own eyes. And now what we're doing is taking away the very protections that we had in place that were keeping us from having even worse air quality. So I think if you think about the improvement we saw when we weren't able to drive places, which I'm not suggesting is the right answer. I'm not suggesting that everyone walk or ride a bike or anything like that. But I am suggesting that the fact that we won't have electric cars and we will now have tailpipes, no one wants to be behind a truck bilging smoke ever, right? And that's what's going to come back, and it will degrade our air quality, and we will see health impacts.
There's such urgency, right? In people today. So it is nice that cause and effect right there, but it's also kind of alarming. So I guess time will tell on that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of policy. And so thank you, Monica, for joining us for the show. And we look forward to talking with you more in the future about that. So that was last week's news. But this week, there's still been so much going on, right, Emily? We've had fires and snow and more snow and more winter that will never end, it seems.
It has been kind of a bad news week.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah. So one thing that stood out to me this week that I noticed, and it was picked up, I'm a satellite junkie. I love looking at satellite imagery and all the things we can see on there. And the fires in Oklahoma, we often talk about fire weather, and all it takes is some sort of ignition, right, to light a fire. And then if that fire weather condition is in place, it can really spread. And that's exactly what happened this week. On Tuesday, in fact, the Ranger Road fire ignited in Beaver County, Oklahoma, which is near the state's panhandle. So there were extreme fire weather conditions, very low humidity, very strong gusty winds that helped fuel these fires. Within a couple of hours, it spread to 15,000 acres. And this was on Tuesday.
Rough.
And then it continued to spread. And at that point, by Wednesday morning, it had scorched more than 145,000 acres, which is roughly the size of Chicago. So the latest here, I'm pulling up the latest as of Friday morning. It's about 20% contained. It is still very active. And we're talking about 283,000 acres at this point. So fire conditions still in place. There are red flag warnings, high wind warnings, extreme wind warnings in portions of western Texas, Oklahoma, and eastern New Mexico. So pretty dangerous situation there right now.
Yeah, it's been super dry too, right? Like haven't had enough rain, haven't had enough snow all this winter, and that contributes. Related to that, the fires and the storm systems, it's just been a really active storm week. There's been like storm after storm coming in across the western US and then blowing into the plains. And so that one of those fanned these fires. And I saw in Colorado, there was also a 30-car pileup. As one of these storms blew through, it kicked up wind and kicked up the dust from the ground and caused what's called a brownout condition. Basically like the opposite of when you think of whiteout with snow. This is dust and dirt being kicked up, and it caused this brownout condition and shut down the interstate in Colorado and led to a 30-car pileup. And sadly, I think 5 deaths because of that. So quite the impact with these windbag storms that blow into the plains.
How scary that must be to be driving along and have that happen. While we're out west, not everyone has avoided the snowfall, though, because there has been some issues as far as avalanches near Tahoe. Did you see this?
I absolutely did. Yeah. I mean, there's 2 sides to this story, right? Last week we were talking about the snow drought out west and how there's been like record low snow this winter. So like, great, starting to make up for that, but it almost came like too much too fast in what you're talking about in California. I did see that the avalanche occurred Tuesday in the Sierra Nevada range, which is like kind of around the little bend in the state up near Lake Tahoe area. 8 people were killed in an avalanche, sadly, and it marked the deadliest in the US since 1981. There were backcountry skiers, really experienced backcountry skiers and guides. They were caught in an avalanche, sadly, after a multi-day trek. And in this stormy pattern, right, it was like extremely heavy snow while they were out, so much snow piling up, something like 3 to 5 feet in a matter of 3 days' time came in that area. So like way too much snow too fast triggered this avalanche. Scary stuff.
Yeah, and it's, the instability of like what the snow is underneath. If you've got like a light powdery snow underneath and then you get that heavy wet snow on top, really any little trigger. And then you have like a slope. So there's like this avalanche danger zone, which is more than 30 degrees of that slope. Then it can, anything from like a skier to like even a rock falling can trigger an avalanche.
Yeah, I mean, this is like not uncommon out west, because if you're saying like the angle of the mountains, those steep mountains, they're common out west, and then you get these massive snow producing storms that happen, and it's just a recipe for avalanches. There were some ski areas and mountains in California that's measured 7 or 8 feet of snow just this week alone. Like that's a crazy amount in a short period of time.
Yeah, and I mean the Northeast is not dodging it either. There are continued storms coming through as you sit there in Connecticut. Yeah. So, we're talking about later today into tonight and portions of New England, but then another nor'easter could be hitting from the mid-Atlantic up into the Northeast. So we're talking about late Sunday into Monday. We could be talking another major impactful winter storm.
We're like, 3 weeks into Punxsutawney Phil's 6-week prediction? So halfway there. Halfway there.
It's good news. We're turning a corner, and it can only go up from here. It has been a rough week. Let's hope for a better week next week.
Yes. And thanks everyone for listening. If there's anything you want to hear about, something that caught your eyes, shoot us a note on social media. We'd gladly chat with you or take a look into it.
And as always, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Weekly Weather Brief. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracey.
And I'm meteorologist Jeromin. Have a good one, guys.